Hello, my name's Deborah and I'm a tutor with Aspire Sussex, an adult education charity based in West Sussex. Welcome to Easy Plant Cuttings, where I will show you how to make softwood cuttings from a plant such as rosemary. This is Rosmarinus officinalis, that's its Latin name, and I will show you how to make more cuttings so that you can plant them up, which will root, and then they will be able to be planted into your garden. So I do hope you'll be able to apply some of these skills at home and to pass things on to your friends too. Let's get started. So plants for free. We've got some rosemary bushes and a mint bush here, and we're going to make the cuttings. Now it's really important to get the right kind of material. So we're making softwood cuttings, and we're going to find a cutting that if you snap it off, it breaks quite easily, okay? So if it bends, it's too bendy at the ends, then it's not ready, okay? So that's ideal, that's snapped off quite quickly. And we'll do the same with the mint. Good, yeah, I can hear that little ping there. So we've got a mint cutting here. I'm going to keep those to one side. And this is an older example of a rosemary, little rosemary shrub. And this is a softer, newer growth rosemary bush. So if you can see how bendy that is. So this isn't really the best for propagation. I would say this one is. It's a bit firmer, and again if you go down and it snaps cleanly, it's ready for propagation. Okay, so let's move these out of the way. And we've got our rosemary cutting, and the first thing you need to look at are the lower leaves, and we're going to remove them by pushing down and take most of them off. Now as you can see, that's at least 3 or 4 inches long. Okay, 10 centimetres is good. I usually do it about that length. Now this cutting has got a raw edge. Use your kitchen knife, nice sharp knife, and you're cutting directly below a leaf node. Now I'll just demo that for you, and there's a leaf node. I'm just going to cut on the diagonal, as so, like so. Now that will mean that the roots have plenty of surface area to root, got plenty of surface area. Now the cutting has got to go somewhere. And I've been collecting lots of different pots, yogurt pots and things, lots and lots of different sizes. And I've also created a little greenhouse here. There's a bottle. It's actually now a little propagation unit. So we're going to put our rosemary cutting into this. We've got a little lid to keep the humidity in. I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. So we've got a container. I've cut the bottle. It's got drainage holes, crucially. You must have drainage holes at the bottom. Now that is because the compost must not get too wet or stay wet. The rooting will rot. This comes from a Mediterranean climate, this lovely rosemary cutting. So really we need to be creating the same environment for the cutting as well. Now I've got some compost, and it's got a lot of sharp sand in it. And crucially, you need to make sure that this compost is nicely sieved, so there's no lumpy bits in it. So you'll be filling the container to about 2 centimetres below the top of the rim of the container. Now the reason you're putting this in to a certain depth is just enough to hold the cutting upwards. Simply that, it's just a holding space really for it to root. Now I've utilised lots of different things from around the house, the kitchen. I've found an old coffee grinder, got a little spoon here, and this is to compact the soil slightly. Now you need to just keep some of the air holes in the compost, otherwise, there we are, I'm just firming up the compost. That's all you're doing. Have a look at that. And the drainage holes are in there, and crucially, you're pushing this little cutting down the side. I find it easier, the root's a lot easier. I'm just going to use my chopstick to create a little dibber, homemade dibber. And then we're sliding that little cutting in down the side there and pressing it in. Okay, so I'll do another one just to show you again with the mint. So here's your mint cutting. You can see where the leaves grow. We're cutting just below the leaf nodes there. That's because there are lots of hormones in there, and they're called auxins, and they produce cells. Cells are generally changing all the time within the plant to create leaves and stems, and it's quite amazing, but these cells here will turn into root cells if the conditions are right for the plant cutting. And plant cuttings need light, not direct light, but bright light, and that's my little terrarium that I'm growing things in at the moment. It's got this one over here. It is actually a little mini greenhouse really in effect, and you can regulate the venting at the sides. You can put the lid, take the lid off to water it, and also to create a little mini greenhouse effect. So again, the cutting goes in the side, it doesn't get as wet. Okay, so we've got there. Now I would probably do 10 or 20 of each of these, because the take up, that means the rooting, could be up to 50% not working. You know, it really depends. Time of day, it's best to do this in the morning. And then once you've got these all laid out ready, I suggest you find somewhere to keep them safe. I've got another tray I found here just to stop the water getting onto the worktops and things, and then you can just water this. Now I've made my own little spritzer, and that's something you need to do every day. Just put it on, and you're just spritzing that. There we are, lightly spritz. Do this every day, and the compost needs to be fairly dry on the top, but it needs to be just on the damp side. Any wetter and you'll find that these will rot and not root. Now you're looking up to probably about a month or more before it actually roots. Patience is obviously a virtue with propagation, and I've got a few examples here now of other techniques and other plants that you can use. Now that's the rosemary and your mint. I'll pop that over there to one side a moment. And I've made a little greenhouse here. Let's start with the okay. I've been into the garden and I've got some cuttings of some Photinia, red robin, quite common, a lovely evergreen shrub actually, and fairly easy to propagate. Similar approach, removing the lower leaves, and this is quite a long cutting, so I'm going to cut it a bit shorter. And I've also checked for disease. Now you do check round and have a look to see that there's nothing untoward. Now I'd be looking for scale, bugs underneath the leaves. There's a little bit of dust there. Check for the health of the leaves, because whatever this is what you're going to get in your new plant. So any slight disease or fungus of any kind will be transferred to the new plant. It is in fact a complete clone of the existing parent plant, the mother plant that was in my garden. So this will be an identical shrub. So lower leaves again, I'll probably take a few more off of this. Now because these leaves are very big, I'm going to cut these down in half. Now that's going to prevent water loss. It'll still be able to photosynthesize through the leaves. The sugars are produced from the sun's energy to feed the plant. And that's why they're so vital in this planet. So we've got our cutting. I've cut just below the leaf node. The auxins are in there ready to go, and we mustn't contaminate that if possible. The tools I'm using, I've washed these with 9 parts water to 1 part bleach to disinfect them. Okay, so I'm an old kitchen knife, but it was in fact disinfected. Now we're making a mini greenhouse here, and I've got a yoghurt pot. I'm going to just fill that with compost. I'm using everything I've found from around the house. I do have a lot of horticultural equipment, but actually you really don't need it all. You can make do with things around the house. Now obviously this pot is a little bit deeper because the cuttings are bigger. The scale of the plant is bigger, so we're making the pot bigger. Now the compost, there's a little bit of lumpiness in there, so I'm going to just sieve that. I do have a little sieve, so I've sieved this compost, okay, with my little baby sieve, and that's actually really handy for my gardening. So we need to compact the soil a little. We don't want too many air bubbles. We need to give it a good shake to reduce the amount of air in there, but you do want to just give it a little firm down as well. You want the root cutting edge to make contact with the soil. Now let's use the chopstick again to make our little cutting. They do seem to root better on the side. I think it's because there's less water contact, so there's less chance of it rotting. So my success rate has always been greater. So again, we're pushing that in on the side there, okay? So I will just spritz the leaves, the surface slightly. Now you'll be doing that 2 or 3 times a day, the spritzing, and then you're obviously wanting to create some kind of humidity. Now literally a bag will do this, a little poly bag, and I've got a peg here, little peg, washing peg, and also I do have a couple of knives and forks which are quite useful as well, and that's to keep it up away from the leaves. Ideally you're not touching the polythene on the leaves of the plant. So there you have it. You can use a peg. Makes a lovely little greenhouse, and you're removing this 2 or 3 times a day to do the spritzing. And just keep an eye on it not to dry out too much, but you really don't want it to be too wet either. So that is the aftercare is really very crucial. So that's your Photinia. So let's have a look at the results after a week or 2. We've got rosemary and mint cuttings in the tub, and we're just checking to see if they've rooted. I'm just pulling tightly there, and actually that mint one there has taken, and you can see there's new leaves growing at the top there. There is one rosemary one that's a bit loose, and that will be able to be popped back in, and you could leave that for a couple more weeks and it will eventually root. Now some of these other ones are nice and firm, and eventually when the root has formed a bit more, and we can have a look at the bottom there, you can see more root in the bottom there, and you will be able to then transfer them into a new pot individually, and then you would be watering them and keeping them on window ledge in the sun, not direct sunlight, but just bright enough. We've also got the Photinia, so let's have a look at the Photinia cutting, and yes, there's some new growth there. I can show you that. We've got some new growth there, new leaves, and things are looking pretty good. We've got 3 new Photinia red robin shrubs coming on there nicely. So once they're big enough, I would say if there's another 1/3 of growth on the top growth, then they will be ready for transferring into their own individual pots, and that'll be great. Then you can have 3 more new shrubs for your garden. I've also got some salvia here in my little mini propagator, and let's just see. Yes, we've got a few that have rooted. So we just need to keep watering them and spritzing them on a daily basis, keeping them warm in indirect sunlight, and they will continue. And yes, there's certainly new growth on the top. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this course and found lots of new tips that you can apply at home. Look out for lots more. Take care now. Bye now.